Hey, everybody, this is Rob Walton. Welcome back to Fireside 42. I hope everybody enjoyed their shutdown and their 4th of July holiday. I know I did. Tony, did you have a good time off?
Man, I sure did. It was a good time to kind of get away from things, good to re-energize and focus on the next phase of our bargaining efforts.
Yeah.
How was yours? Did you have a good time?
Yeah, it was pretty good. We watched fireworks. I smoked up some chicken, did a little swimming. Yeah, it was a good week. All right, so this week we are going to talk about production standards. We got together with Josh Epperson and Kelsey Smith, and they had a lot of good things to say about how our job's supposed to be run and all the mechanisms and teams we're going to have in place to help us keep that way.
They had really good input. That's their little baby. You know, they spend a lot of time with that in their subcommittee. So they have a lot to say about that, and they're very knowledgeable about it as well. So I think it'll be a good one as well.
Yeah, let's get into it. All right. Well, Kelsey, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Everybody, we're talking with Kelsey today. He's what's your last name?
Smith.
Yes. Okay, I should have known that. I should have done my research. That's my fault.
That's okay.
But we're here with you today, first time.
Yes, sir.
We got Tony with us as always. He's our sound guy.
Yep, I'm here.
And as always, or almost always, we've got. I'm sorry. What's your name again, sir?
Justin Fryer.
We got Josh here too. He's our spiritual
Come to
guide.
the basement.
Yeah.
Some popsicles.
So let's.
Please edit that out.
No. We got to leave this in. We got to
Leave it in.
We got to leave some of this funny in the podcast for people because we've been so serious lately. We need some humor.
A little bit of levity.
Right. I agree.
And again, we're gonna talk about some serious stuff, and we're gonna talk about process standards. Is that right? Is that what we're doing today?
Production standards.
Production standards. Yeah, I'm tired.
No, you're good.
It's been a long day. It's hard to do the 8-hour day thing. Not that I always do that in MEB. We don't always do that.
Right.
But
7-hour day plus 3 hours of podcast.
yeah, and then come in here. It's worth it, right? So let's talk about production standards. Man, I got questions. I got some shit to tell you. What is production standards, and what are some of the 10,000 feet kind of accomplishments we've got so far in bargaining?
Well, we'll roll it back kind of to the start. So it was me and Kelsey. This was our baby, so we tag teamed that, kind of ran through, and it was really good because, you know, I'm from assembly. I've also done logistics. Kelsey's been in paint, so, you know, it had some good, you know, perspectives there and stuff, you know. Body shop, I'm sorry, we didn't have somebody. No, I'm just kidding. We talked to a lot of people from body and kind of keep things focused and stuff. And we had you know, Tony nearby who was from battery, so we made sure like whatever we were working on, you know, we spoke to a lot of people from a lot of areas to make sure things would fit. You know, but the truth is, you know, a standard is a standard no matter where it's at, or it's supposed to be, and that's kind of the root of a lot of what we were working on. As far as the subcommittee, it was kind of wide-ranging. Like, I'm actually looking at the list in front of me, and we covered things like the hours of work, breaks and lunches, alternate work schedules, overtime, production standards itself, and also like shift premium and layoff and reduction of workforce. So we had a lot of different, you know, areas to cover. And so, you know, when you think about, okay, this is production standards, there's a lot more to it than just work rules, but that's a big part of it. That was a big area.
It sounds to me like there's a lot to all of this stuff. I mean, every one of our conversations have been, you know, they should have been 2 or 3 episodes, you know, really. But so let's start with the production standards proper part of it. Listen, I've got complaints about my area, right?
Let's hear them.
So, okay, well, let me give you an example. So I work in HOP. I've talked about this before, and on the ID4. And I work door line. And the way door line was engineered, right, it takes 3 people to build a door, right? We have ARG1, ARG2, and ARG3. That's the way the line was engineered. Recently, because sales have been down, they have just deleted the middle person. And for months, they just did that. They just didn't put anybody over there. So they've increased our workload by 50%. They decreased the amount of time we had to do that job in. And then as people started complaining about that a little bit, it seems like they went ahead and did a temporary standard work change.
Yeah.
But there was no ergo study. Now, we have to do success factors every year, right? So, I mean, we're constantly reading this stuff. And as I understand Volkswagen's own policy, in order to change standard work, right, you have to have an ergo study, a time study. You have to interview people, make sure that that this change is not going to adversely affect the workforce. And none of that stuff was done. They just said, hey, we're just
going to change it.
yeah, this engineered line that requires 3 people to do a job is now down to 2. Sorry about your luck. So with what you guys have bargained, is there going to be some protections against that moving forward?
There will be ways to investigate to find out if the changes were made appropriately. So one of the things that we really need to understand at the outset is that everybody that doesn't like their process thinks it was set up wrong. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. And so we have to think about if there are, 800 or 900 individual processes throughout the entire plant and all the different shops, we're going to have to look at all those. And we cannot do that on day one. So probably the way we're going to do things starting out is going to be through, complaints based on I'm in trouble for an A rank, maybe the process is to blame, or I was injured here. So we're looking at it like, the company uses the term heat map a lot, but that's legitimate. That if people are being hurt by a process, that's my number one priority to go look at. If you're being injured because you're supposed to have 3 people doing a job and now there's only 2, we need to take a look at that immediately because we can't have people getting hurt because of that. And one of the tools, you're going to hear me say the word tool a lot through this, is HYP. And this does kind of run into the realm of health and safety a little bit, that, this is the first tool to show I'm having an issue here.
What is HYP?
That's the Hauser process, the X or the O you're supposed to mark when you clock in or out.
Oh, that thing that nobody ever does because it's meaningless?
Right.
The thing that nobody ever does because it's
thing?
meaningless.
I'm guilty.
I mean, I've been through it too. But the question is, all right, if you're having a problem, you need someone to know. It's like, that's a really good way to start the paper trail of a problem here. And it's kind of like using your andon. If you never use your andon, there's no record that there's a problem in this area. So one of the things we kind of came across as we went through negotiations, and Kelsey can back this up, is that we didn't understand a lot of what Volkswagen's own, the way that they build processes, because it's not done on the line. Like you were talking about ergo study and things like that. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to see somebody out there with a measuring tape looking at how high you're lifting something. That doesn't mean it's not done, but it's just not something that's done during production, which is kind of counterintuitive, but it's real. So when we're trying to look at something, we found that there are a lot of tools that the company has that they don't use. Like we have a lot of rules, policies, things like that are just, not enforced, not looked at, not utilized. And, so we would be sitting across and going, hey guys, we have a problem with this. This is something that needs to be addressed. And they go, oh, well, we have this that handles that. And I was like, oh, does it? So like if it does, you wouldn't mind like signing your name to it that this is how we're going to do things from here on. So at that point, it makes it grievable, which is a really handy tool to kind of follow through. And then the other part of it is just the construction of the processes. They utilize a system where they usually do a video of something initially, and it kind of captures the elements of a process. To pick this up, to push this here, to twist this there, and then they take that back and they study the movements, just, a 40-second long video clip. They break that down like piece by piece. Did you twist your right wrist this far to put this in? Is this the way it's supposed to be done? So on and so forth. And that's where a lot of the measurements come from. And then they'll weigh apart and they'll see how far it has to move in millimeters or whatever from place X to place Y. And that's how they start building up a document, a record of these movements, these processes. So later on, they'll be assessing it and they'll go, wait a minute, we think there may be some time here based on the previous information. So a lot of the processes that we have now were built on information that was gathered prior. When a new part comes in, they'll have new information added. But, if you already took these measurements, you know how many steps this is, you know how heavy this part is, you don't need to remeasure that. It's supposed to be used. Now, one of the things that'll be really good for us, but it'll take a long time to make sure it works out everywhere, is if one of those things is in dispute, we can take a look at the work that was done by industrial engineers to see, hey, is this correct? So you're almost verifying that the work was done appropriately to make sure the process was built right. Now that is something that takes a little bit of time to do. It's very technical, but it's something that we'll have the ability to handle.
Will there be more team member participation in this kind of stuff moving forward? Like, I hear what you're saying about a video and studying the video and the movements and that kind of thing. And based on my prior work experience, I would argue that that information will only take you so far. You have to take that out in the field and test it, and then ask the people who are actually doing this stuff, for 8 hours a day and not 40 seconds for a video. How do you feel at the end of the 8 hours? Are you in pain? Are you sore? And the only way you can do that is to
How's your process?
Communicate with the people doing the job. And that's not happening now, right? That was just laid on us, and they said, this is how we do it now. Especially for a task that was engineered. They already went through all the stuff that I guess that you're explaining, right? And their conclusion was, it takes 3 people to build a door.
Yeah.
So far as I can tell, right now, they're like, well, we don't want to pay another guy, so we're just going to change the process.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so is there any room in there for team members to give input?
There were several demands there, and we got a lot settled on that because, I can't speak for body, but how it is in assembly is a lot of times if they're trying to see if something's viable time-wise, they'll find the fastest person.
Oh, my gosh.
And put them there, and they'll go like super speed. And then they'll look at it and go, oh, yeah, there's even extra time. There's more time here than we thought. So one of the things we went through was like trying to make sure that the average employee could do this work, that the average person was capable of performing this. And if there's something going wrong with it, it's like, all right, well, we can take another look. There's a way to handle that. And, because that was the point we made. We were also, hitting with a lot of questions about ergonomics because, okay, you're what, 6'1", 6'2",
Thank you.
There you go.
I'm 6 foot, but I'll take it.
Okay, yeah.
I could be 6'5" on the radio. I'm 6'5".
Hey, everyone needs a couple
Be
inches.
anything you want.
That's right.
On a proud day, he's
Right.
6'2".
That's right.
And
I'm
he
good.
feels good about himself.
I'm good looking.
Right.
I'm good looking too.
Right. What's the difference between 8 hours of sleep and 4 hours of sleep?
Right, yeah.
But no, you think about it, it's like, all right, here's a 6 foot person, muscular build or whatever, and then here's a 5'4" person, not muscular. So can they lift the same weight? Will one be impacted by it more than another? It's like these are some of the things that need to be looked at, and those are things that are supposedly figured into a lot of the ergonomic calculations. Like I said, they're standards that they use when they're formulating a process, and none of it's perfect. But the whole point is like, okay, we're identifying an issue here. We need to go about, maybe the testing they do, the silo testing where, hey, how tall are you? How much can you lift? Can you reach? Can you push? That needs to be taken into consideration more because there are some areas where like, hey, if you can't lift this much reasonably all day long, you're going to suffer more than someone else. So, because I remember, when I first landed on Doorline a long time ago, I was like, wow, everybody's over 6 feet tall here, except for like 2 or 3 people. And the reason was you had to be that high to reach up to the top of the door and not be hurt in the process. And everybody that was shorter than that ended up having shoulder problems. And go figure. Like, what's the right way to solve that problem?
Yeah. Tony?
It's a lot of work.
And really, what you see it is currently being done by the company, maybe, but you'll see this a lot on our side when it comes to solving these problems that you have in the process. It's going to be several people being part of this. It might be health and safety and ergonomics that take part in that study or that review. And you'll have people from continuous improvement that are going to be very involved in that process as well, because they're also very involved in the front end of that when it comes to reviewing that and maybe developing or tweaking that process. And those are things that we never had before that now we will have, and we'll have SMEs, if you want to call it that, subject matter experts from all departments or areas or representatives in areas that we have to get involved in that process as they're needed. And some of those things could also include a team leader and a team member that are doing this stuff every day that have valuable input that we need to know about, especially when you want to get to a point where, the people that did go through silo testing, that the ones that have been identified that are capable of doing that particular pitch that are involved in that as well.
Now, is there going to be a team for production standards? Like we talked about some other teams.
Yeah,
There's going to be a production standard team.
Yeah, and I mean, if anybody's been listening, I think they know there's a common theme through all these podcasts. We keep talking about representation
Exactly.
over and over. Everything comes back to it. Like the first person you talk to is probably going to be, your steward, your committee person. That's going to be the one that goes, oh, yeah, I can't handle this. Let me call the production person. Let me call the health and safety person. Let me call the CI person, and that is going to be the game changer for us. But we're going to have 2 full-time production standards reps.
Mm-hmm.
But think about that for a minute, and this is why it's so important to have that participation in the different areas and stuff. Is like one production standards person, whoever that winds up being, is only going to be from the area they're from, right? But they're going to be working in all the different shops: battery, body, paint, assembly, logistics, even quality, And so we need to work very closely with the people from that area, representatives of those people, who can say like, yeah, here, this is a problem here. Like if I go into paint shop, Kelsey, I need you with me.
Right.
It's like, I don't know, number one, where a lot of things are, but we got to work together to make sure things are right. Because you'll be able to explain it to me. Okay, cool.
Yeah, it'll be a learning curve. I think the production standards language and the future representatives in production standard showing people that the company has to be held accountable for everything that they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's been duly noted that the company has chosen to do whatever they want to do, when they want to do it. You have no say-so whatsoever. You comply or you get reprimanded for it. That's going to change. In order for changes to be made, it's going to have to be a mutual agreement between the company and the union before anything can be signed off on. One example of the little bit of power that we've gained along the way is I had an employee reach out to me about work being added to his pitch on one shift versus the next. And he reached out to me and he complained about it. So I was able to reach out to someone up in management about it. And they actually looked into it and they got back to me and that issue was resolved. And I haven't had any more complaints from this employee since then. But that just goes to show you that even though we don't have a contract, you do have rights. We do have power, and we have to learn this contract, and we have to exercise our rights and our power here in order for us to succeed.
That's just such a good example that Kelsey just brought to
100%.
To this, because he also mentioned management, right? Bringing it to the attention of the supervisor. This is not just going to be the UAW local union running the show. There's still management that has to manage the lines and the process and the pitch and all these things, and they're very involved in that. It's just that when it doesn't get done, and it doesn't get done right, or even if it does get done, we are very involved in helping that, getting improved.
Right.
You have somebody that's done that type of work, working with everybody to make sure, like, okay, our folks doing the job, have what they need to do it successfully. And to do well and not get in trouble for it or get hurt by it in the process.
Yeah, so it could be involvement of everybody. It could be maybe it's just getting handled by the supervisor and he'll get the right people involved and fix that issue or address that issue. If it doesn't get addressed, that it could mean that, one of our stewards gets involved because an employee has an issue that's not being addressed. So the steward gets involved and brings that up to the attention of other leadership within the UAW in particular areas that can help solve that problem and push the right buttons to make sure that issue that's going on is, first of all, valid, and then it's also being addressed across all shifts.
Okay.
Yeah, because one of the big ones we're seeing right now, because they have all the pre-series cars coming and going, there's a lot of changes coming. And one of the issues the company has from an industrial engineer and IE point of view is, okay, I'm one guy, I've got 3 lines assigned to me, that's a couple hundred processes, and I have to update all the standard work for this new process all at once. While you also have people from different departments coming down, like testing new equipment, bringing out parts that people maybe haven't put on before. We're trying to balance all that, and it's an impossible task. And I'm not really making excuses for them, allowing things to fall through the crack, but I can see why it happens. And so, the whole idea is like we're always going to be, in a continuous improvement environment, a lean production facility. We're always going to be having those changes and adjustments and improvements and things like that over time. The issue is, hey, if I've got somebody from Pilot Hall out here shoving a new tool or telling me to do things a different way, I don't mind that so much because that's how we get better. Mm-hmm. Maybe once we learn a new technique or find a better way to do it through the proper channels, it'll actually be better. Your job will be better and the quality will be better. And then we sell more cars, we make more money, everybody's happy. Mm. But if I'm doing this and I'm getting behind, and I've got no support, that's a problem. And that was one of the things we addressed through the language primarily. Also, was rules for trials and that support will be there, that if another department's out there trying to get you to do things a different way, that they're responsible for it, and that they're seeing that you have the support you need, so that if you start getting behind, it's like you're not going to get in trouble for not doing your job or you miss something. It's like, no, you've got the support you need to be able to perform this attempt correctly. That's what's the biggest point of all this is to make sure like you can do your job, not get hurt, and not be disadvantaged because somebody wants to, try something experimental.
But it has to be very important that the company takes the feedback from the employee very seriously, because the employees are doing the job. So the only way that you'll be able to improve any standards in the company is through that route, I feel, personally.
Right, like trial and error and documented efforts.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, from my point of view, I mean, outside of maybe the EO, nobody from the supervisor on up knows my line better than I do. I'm there every day. I know when it's running slow. I know when it's running fast. When it stops, I typically, within seconds, I know why it stopped. And I would imagine that's the same with every other team member and every other part of the shop.
Yeah.
And it would be silly for the company to continue to ignore us as a valuable resource. I mean, combined, there's hundreds of years of experience out on that shop floor.
Literally, yeah.
That can be utilized to make this stuff run better.
I agree.
Yeah. And that was one of the things we covered too, is like more ease of suggestions for how to change something or adjust something. Like a standard work change request doesn't necessarily just have to be a supervisor. It can be through a team leader. So it can be like team effort from members to the people that actually deal with the work. Because, if I'm a team member and I'm always messing up, or, because the part's not right or the process isn't working, who helps me out? The team leader. Yeah. Like they're having to catch that all the time too. And it frustrates everybody. But like, the correct course of action isn't to ignore that or ignore that person waving and saying, hey, help me. It's like, maybe we need to go like, okay, this would be a whole lot better if this part was here, if this was there. Let's put that proposal together. Let's make that suggestion through the proper channels like everyone else should. And then we see how it goes. So we'll have a better mechanism for trying to kind of, up engineer our processes a little bit from the ground up.
I mean, I'm listening to this episode, and then I just got to think of all the other episodes we've done so far, and I feel like the common theme and thread is that we're just here to make things better.
Yeah.
For us
ideally.
and for the company. I mean, is it really not what we're trying to do? I think so.
That's the goal.
I mean, isn't that
it's simple?
Yeah, for me personally, and I would imagine it's got to be the same for the vast majority of us out there. We want to, be proud of the work that we do, and we want to be good at it. And we want to be respected for the fact that we are proud of what we do and we are good at it, right? So
I think that's why we're all sitting here right now. Like, we all give a shit. Yeah. That's the whole thing.
2 shits.
Multiple shits.
All the shits. All right, well, okay. So that's a lot about production centers. Let's talk about some of that other stuff that you got on your list there. Some of the ancillary stuff that came along.
But one more thing, I want to touch on one thing with production standards before we go, is like there's a lot there, and a lot of it looks like what we already know the rules to be. Why did you come through orientation? You get taught all this kind of stuff in the Lean Center, and you get taught all this stuff in the Profi room, and then you hit the line and it doesn't work or it's not used. Like that's one of the problems, and that was one of the things we went through with the language is like if we have a system that works really well, like what HOIP is supposed to do, what the and-on is supposed to do, what a standard work change request or a trial or something like that is meant to do is make it better. And better doesn't just mean, hey, I'm going to exploit the shit out of this person more. And so all the things we've got, even if it's not that dramatic, like, oh, I stop the whole line if I don't like something in my process. It's not like that. It's a set of tools. It's like sockets and wrenches, and you pick up the right one when you need to use it, and you use it to achieve what you need. And that's the whole point of that language. It's building blocks. It's a tool set. That's what it's there for. And, we got to be educated to use that. And that's what, the whole rep structure is about.
So what is the purpose of the 5 why then when you make mistakes? I received one once, and I had to sit down, and they pointed out to me, what I did wrong, and there was a series of questions.
Yeah,
and this was a crazy experience for me because I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. It's like I really wasn't allowed to answer the questions.
Yeah,
because if I answered the questions, then that's not really what I was supposed to say. So
Right.
it was rewritten to comply in accordance with the answers that
the
need
desired
to be given.
outcome.
You know what I'm saying? In order to just make the paperwork right. But
Yeah.
I'm just like, well, why did you make this mistake? This is why, but no, we're going to say this instead. So it's like,
You're
I'm
rigging the
learning, but
process.
I'm really not learning anything from that when you're just
And
creating
you know what?
a fake
You were
I
were
don't
learning
think
how to pencil work
reality.
paperwork is
You
what
know
you were
what I'm
learning
just
how to
like-
do.
I don't think the 5 why is there for you to learn. I think it's a problem solving tool.
It is.
I think it's supposed to be, you know, and this is an example of like something we've got that we could use more effectively is, all right, this happened, this A rank, this problem, this defect, whatever. All right, why?
Root cause.
Right. I scratched the door because the tool didn't have the right kind of protective cover on it. All right. Why wasn't the right protective cover on it? You started looking at like, okay, who's supposed to check that? How do we reorder them? And then if it starts going a little bit further, you find out like, oh, we've been complaining for 6 months that we don't have this in general stores, so we can't put it on the tool.
Right.
Well, okay, that starts pointing in a direction that nobody wants to think about, and that's why it turns into like, oh, it's because you weren't paying attention, you weren't careful, you didn't wrap extra tape around something, you know, and you know, so you can see how like a problem-solving tool ends up just getting used as an ass covering device. Same thing with the 1-point lessons everybody loves to get. You know, that's a good thing. If there's an issue going on, like, yeah, please make me aware of it. I don't want to create this problem. I want to know about it. Like, oh, maybe I didn't realize it. But a lot of times it's used like, okay, well, we got to do something, so let's just throw that out there. It's a tool we've got that we don't use correctly.
Right.
That happened to me one time, kind of made me mad. I was in the cell cleaning one day. We've all seen inside the cells. They're cluttered. There's
It's full of 1-point lessons.
yeah, it's full of them. And I was stepping over some ducting and trying to avoid some wires, and there's parts in there. I was trying to avoid the parts, and I slipped. I just slipped. It happens, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And then like the very next day, there was a thing on the whiteboard. His team member wasn't paying attention, wasn't aware of the danger. It's like, kiss my ass.
Yeah, the accident report.
Yeah, there was nobody more acutely aware of the danger than I was.
Right.
Right. By that particular area of the shop is inherently dangerous. Right. Just because you're aware of it doesn't mean the danger goes away. Danger's still there. You're still going to slip once in a while. It's just the nature of the thing. Nobody did anything wrong.
Right.
But they just worded it in such a way that said team basically made it look like I wasn't paying attention, and that's why I slipped. And it's like, no.
Right.
it's-
Yeah. There's water on the floor. I'm so careless. It's like, that's the whole point of representation again. Like if you have a situation you're running into like that, it's like you need to talk to that rep. Maybe that rep needs to call over the health and safety person to go like, hey, something needs to be done about this. Like what's the way to solve this problem? How do we keep it from happening again? That's the whole idea of the safety culture from the health and safety conversation is, you know, let's figure out what these problems are and fix it. Instead of getting you in trouble because you slipped, let's do something so that people don't slip anymore.
Yeah.
And that's where the language will come in handy at, man, to bring changes to, you know, what's the norm around here, because the finger is always pointing at the employee, no matter, you know, what really goes on or what really happens. And we'll be able to change that, you know, once we get this contract ratified. It's like there will be thorough investigations, or you'll have the option to file grievances if you feel the need to, or, you know, we want to resolve issues before filing grievances.
Yeah,
if
can we talk it
of
out?
course, but, you know, now there will be thorough investigations on the behalf of the employee and from the company, and it's a joint effort. So
Now, is this going to be like, is this one of those things where you file a report or grievance or whatever it is that it cannot be closed out until it gets its way back to the team member? Is that going to be a similar scenario? That it just doesn't go off into the ether somewhere and you never hear or see from it again?
Yeah, I believe everything that goes on paper, there's a route to track. There's a way to get back to it. And, you know, that'll be really vital for everything. But if you were a person that was involved in it, it's like, yeah, I believe you're a part of it as it goes on through. You know, if there's an update with it, you're supposed to know. If it's getting closed or bumped or whatever, you're supposed to know because it's your deal, you know.
Just shit. My mind is still at the 5 whys, man.
you're good. Come on.
And the reason why I'm still there
Why?
is
Why?
let me give you 5 reasons.
First time on the episode, and he's blowing our minds, man.
Right.
Holy shit!
You're coming back on the next
Oh,
one.
man.
You're
No, for real.
I did too good.
Yeah, no. But it's like, remember,
Cool it off.
but because we talk about culture, and it's just because what I've seen at other places, one in particular that I've worked at, and I'm sure many of us have as well, worked at other places there. It's just a little bit different culture. The 5 Whys is one of the most amazing and efficient tools that you can have to really dig deep and figure out what the issue is. Mm-hmm. The problem is that management is not driving lean manufacturing in such a way, in an honest way. There's no consequences to the, like a supervisor, somebody else that's overseeing that process, that if an issue is identified, you want to fix that. Well, the reason why they want to cover it up is because they get their ass in trouble when the truth comes out, right? It's just a lot of stuff is being covered up sometimes. That's very normal for people to do shit like that. And it shouldn't be that way. But lean manufacturing and going through Lean Six Sigma teaches you that the only way you can fix that problem is be really honest about it and have a room of people, like a committee, that dig deep into that process, that are involved in, Fishbone and all those other tools that you have to fix that process. And it's just up to the company, with our help, to get to that point to where they can have a culture change, where you have a more honest discussion about that and fix that problem, instead of just pointing fingers all the time and this is why it's going wrong and that's your problem and you were the issue. Mm-hmm. Identify the issue, fix it, and just move on without discipline or intimidation or anything like that. That's just happening a lot, and that shouldn't be happening.
Right. I mean, you think about the responsibility of management and the way things run here, and I'm not hitting on anybody in particular, but if I'm a supervisor, I know I'm going to be on this line maybe a couple of years, maybe a little longer, maybe a little bit less, and then I'm going somewhere else. So the question is what's the motivation to fix it? You are probably going to be at that spot the majority of your career. You have way more invested in this to make it better, to make it work, to solve the problem. And, that's the important thing to remember. Like that's the whole drive behind, a union and people participating in it, is because this is where I'm at. This is part of my life being here. And hopefully that doesn't change for a while, till retirement. So that's it. That's where that motivation comes from, to try to contribute to the solution to the problem in a way that allows me to keep doing this job for another 20, 30, 40 years, depending on how the 401k goes.
Well, and I think, too, and this is another through thread that kind of keeps popping up in all of our conversations, is we know, and it's important that people understand, that even after this contract is signed, management is still going to be management. It's still their factory to run.
Manager's going to manage.
Yeah.
But what's happening, what we see all too often with your example, with the 5 Whys and whatever, and some of the stuff that I've seen and witnessed, and we've all been there, is that leadership in Volkswagen, they have no oversight, right? So they do a lot of things for expediency, and if you argue with them, if you stand your ground, unfortunately, we live in a state where they're just like, well, we'll just get rid of you. We'll put another meat bag in your spot.
Yeah, not anymore.
But the union now is oversight. Volkswagen's still going to run that factory, but we're going to have a union here with muscle and teeth to say, no, these are your policies, a lot of this stuff.
We've got a contract, we've got just cause, we've got all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we're going to hold you accountable to the things you said you would do.
Right, and why? Is it just out of purely selfish reasons? Or is it really that, the better we do, the more cars we build, the more we bring our quality up, the longer people stay here? It's like, that's how we make a place that lasts.
Possibly make a cheaper car, get a bigger market share, make more money. Yeah, it's all part of the same.
That's
right?
why
End goal.
It's extremely important to say this. Once you get this contract in hand, read the contract from start to finish. Learn, get to know your contract like your spouse, your kids. I mean, become one with it, because this is going to be your work Bible. Mm-hmm. It's going to teach you how you can move, what you can do, how to protect yourself. So if you get the contract and you don't delve into it, you're going to really, really be missing out on the important keys of the contract. It's not just about money. There are a whole lot of different other things in the contract that you're going to need to know in order to survive, because, like you said, the company is going to be the company, right? Even with a contract. So
it's that toolkit, man. If I don't know how to use that socket wrench, it ain't going to do me any good.
Right.
Learn it, know it, ask questions about it.
Got to read it and understand it.
Why the hell didn't you come on the show sooner? I feel a little cheated, actually. I've been stuck with these guys.
I don't know, man. coming to a show near you.
All right, let's
moving on to other
Okay.
stuff, right?
yeah,
on,
let's
man.
let's get on to that other stuff because there's some good stuff in there that I didn't realize was part of this. So talk to me a little bit about what's on your list there.
Let's see. So overtime was another big one. And you got to kind of break that down between voluntary overtime, like, hey, do you want to stay over? Do you want to come in on Saturday versus like mandatory overtime? And that was kind of a weird one to have conversations about the mandatory side because, yeah, we'll see, an hour over, 2 hours over every now and then, but it really hasn't been very common lately. And anybody that's worked here longer than about 4 or 5 years remembers when we were working every Saturday, when we were working an hour over every day or 2 hours over every day, and so it was really important to kind of have some standards and rules in place about how we're going to do that. And really a lot of that was just an honest conversation. It's like, hey man, if you make a calendar and every single Saturday is a flex day on the whole fucking calendar, when am I going to have a weekend? How can I plan to take, my family on a vacation or something like that? It's like, you can't, and so that was one of the things we were able to make some good progress with just through having a reasonable conversation about it.
I was going to say it's amazing what reasonable people can accomplish.
A lot.
Right. It's like, where are they?
Right.
So that's the mandatory part because we have to be realistic is that if we're doing well, if our workplace is doing well and people are buying our cars, man, all right, let's build some extra ones. Let's sell those things, but let's all share in the benefits of it. Let's do those extra units in a way that doesn't get people hurt. And let's do it in a way that lets everybody feel, some of the benefit from those sales. Like if we're knocking it out of the park, selling the shit out of these cars, it's like, all right, just let me have my little piece. That's a different subcommittee, but that's the point.
Right.
And so we have to be realistic that sometimes we will be doing overtime. But the point is like make sure it's evenly spread, it's fair, it's not constant, things like that. Back to the work-life balance issue as best as you can.
No, I was going to ask because I don't know the overtime thing. Is there any way to lean more on, say, volunteers than mandatory overtime so that happens less often? Because it seems to me like there's a ton of people out there that just want to soak that stuff up.
It's a problem-solving opportunity. It's like, if we need people to come in, if there's a yard sweep or some repairs and quality they need extra help with or something like that. It's like, and that's the advantage of having a union in general is that for a lot of these types of problems, there'll be a conversation. Back to that whole reasonable people and how you can move mountains by working together and just talking through issues. And that'll be one of the ways we solve it. For the voluntary overtime, one of the complaints we heard over and over that came up in member demands and stuff like that was like not being offered overtime opportunities. Like we know they're there, but a lot of times it's, you might have a line and it's the same 4 or 5 people that always want the OT. So sometimes it gets to a point where they're the only ones that get asked. And just to be fair, maybe, Tony wants to buy a boat. So he wants to soak up some of that OT if he can. So, the whole idea was like, all right, let's make a list in order of seniority, just because that's a good starting point. We go through the whole list. We asked person 1 through 5. They didn't want the OT. Person 6 did. So person 6 gets it. Cool. Now you got it. So the supervisor keeps that list. It should be hanging up publicly. And then we know, all right, the next time overtime opportunities are there, let's ask person number 7. And then we go down the list until everybody's had the chance to say yes or no. And then we start back up at the list and go down again.
And they can't cap your overtime.
Yeah.
They can't. They cannot cap it.
No. There's no more. Well, you can only work 2 of the 5 days that they're offering for you to come in and get extra hours.
Yeah, it's like as long as you're like okay in the rotation, it's like, there's no like, oh, well, we decided you can only get this many. It's like, no, if the hours are there and it's your turn, they're yours.
No more favoritism?
What?
I like that's my favorite. That's my favorite.
Why?
Yeah.
Overtime isn't really. I'm
I
not.
like the boat. I do like that boat.
I'm sure it's probably going to be a great boat.
It's a
The only
goal.
time they ever ask me if I want overtime is if to come in early in the morning. And I ain't getting up yesterday to work tomorrow.
Yeah, so they scratch your name off the list. We asked Robert, he didn't want it, so we're going to go ask Kelsey. Kelsey, do you want that OT?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, cool. But then you can't get mad because you were offered. It was fair, and everybody had the chance to say yay or nay.
I won't be mad at you.
No, until you want to vote.
You'll have some out there that will be like,
It's like, I want that boat money.
I mean, I don't mind staying. I mean, it's just personal preference. I wish there was more opportunities to stay after as opposed to coming early.
Yeah.
Early startup. But
And I mean, that
that
gets
is what
back
it is,
to,
and I'm okay with it.
it gets back to manager's going to manage. It's
Yeah.
like, this is what I need. We need people to start this, whatever, and we work it out that way. And we built in an off ramp. We actually had somebody ask about this today. They're like, what's up with this? I heard this, I heard that, something about charging hours. And this is kind of complicated, but we built sort of a back door into the language. We worked with the company and our UAW people who had experienced this. In some shops where people are really competitive for overtime, in the UAW, they have systems that track hours. Like Robert was offered a Saturday, so you were offered 8 hours. You said no, so it shows Robert was offered and refused 8 hours. And then we asked Kelsey, do you want to work 4 hours? Well, Kelsey still needs to get offered 4 more hours to be equal with what you were offered. And that way they track that to make sure everybody's fairly and equally offered the same amount of time in that rotation. Now, I'm not sure, based on how many people leave on a no pay, no penalty or whatever, it's like, are we going to have people arguing over overtime? It's like, I'm not sure. But we built something into the language so that if the normal rotation where everybody gets offered and says yes or no, if that turns out to not work, we'll work on building a different system that tracks things with better detail. And, maybe, we get to a point where people are making so much money. It's like, hey, I would love to have that OT. And it turns into a different culture. Will it or will it not? I don't know.
I don't see it being a problem because
I don't think so.
Even with the new system in play, it's still going to pan out to being the same people.
That's what I kind of thought.
Always wanted to work it.
Yeah. It's like my own issue is like, I'll run from overtime whenever I can. Right. But it's like once in a while, like maybe I got a bill I need to pay off and stuff. So at least ask me.
Yeah.
It's like, just give me the opportunity to say no. That's
and
my
that makes
ask.
all the difference.
Right. So we have some options as far as the way the voluntary stuff is going to go that kind of, number one, builds fairness and allows us to dive even deeper if we need to really parse it out to make it super fair. So, we'll kind of see how it goes, and we got the room to dance if we need to. So
Sweet. What else we got? We're running long. Shoot, you got something else?
running long.
Yeah.
Break time was one of them.
Give me an hour break time. I want an hour break time.
No. That's still main table, so I'm not going to really get into that because it's still being batted back and forth.
That's fair.
One of the things you got to think about is like a longer break. It really is kind of costly as far as the company's view because they're going to look at like, okay, if my lines are down an extra 10, 20 minutes a day, how many cars is that? 10, 15 cars times 2 shifts, 3 in body, and times 250, 270 production days a year. Like that turns into a lot of cars. And so they're looking at like, man, I just lost out on a few thousand cars this year because of break times. Now, of course, maybe we finally get to 60 JPH. Maybe we get more efficient so we have less downtime from quality issues or machine breakdowns or something like that. There's a lot of ways to get around.
Getting lost en route.
Right. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that factors into it. And hopefully that's the kind of stuff we kind of help solve more in the future that makes it a little bit easier of a pill to swallow. But yeah, we'll see where break times go. Shift differential, that's still one of the ones that's on the main table that we're going back and forth on, so don't want to get too deep in that.
Yeah, so just to clear up for people who are listening, because it's something that hasn't come up before, but we kind of avoid the main table stuff because there's no TAs, right? I mean, there's no agreement. So anything we say will be probably wrong tomorrow.
Yeah, it's still going back and forth, right. and we want to make sure, because I don't know if you're listening to this podcast the day we record it. I don't know if you're listening to it a year from now. And so I want to be really clear that right now it's in play, it's fluid, it's not settled. And so it's just not right to try to say it'll be this or it'll be that, or I want it to be that.
Right.
We'll see where it goes through the course of negotiations.
Okay.
Yep. Same thing, shift differential falls into that. Layoff and reduction of workforce, we had a lot of success with. We ended up making a really large article with that, basically determining how seniority would be used to make sure in the event of, a furlough or something like that it's carried out the right way, the fair way. And unfortunately, we had a lot of experience with that with the battery plant and MEB furlough last year, where, the idea is like you ask the senior people, hey, do you want to take this voluntarily? If they say no, you go down to the lower seniority people. It's like, all right, well, you're going to have to take the furlough or whatever. Again, the culture here is different than other places. Everybody was like, man, give me that furlough. Why didn't I get the furlough? And, so we just tried to make sure that the rules were set up fairly and clearly for all that kind of stuff as it goes. That's a separate conversation,
Anything else we might have missed that you guys want to add?
We also used to have swing shift where it was like every week it was nights, every week it was days. And right now that's not here. We have this schedule we've got. And so we're like, all right, let's work out all these alternative work schedules. Like we want to make sure everybody, no matter what shift you're on, you get the same break time, you get the same holidays, you get all the stuff equally, that because you're on a different shift, you shouldn't suffer because of it. And, basically they said, well, we don't do alternate work schedules right now, so we don't feel the need for it. So we basically came up with an agreement that if something like that were to appear in the future, we would sit down, work it all out, and have it ironed out before it goes into effect. And, we had a lot of luck with certain, pieces of language, not just in production standards where, it's like, okay, maybe it's not an issue now, but we commit to working it out to the mutual benefit of the company and the employees before any of it goes into effect. So that's pretty cool to me.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's quit. I'm tired. It's a long day.
Goodbye.
All right. Well, Kelsey, I appreciate you coming on, man.
Thank you for having me.
You're way better
Glad
than
to
these.
be here, man.
You're way better than these other guys.
Oh.
Way better. Josh, I appreciate you, Tony.
Hey, anytime.
Yeah, anytime, man.
All right.
Come on, man. A little bit more energy at the end.
I'm so tired.
What are we going to do?
Get our shit.
There we go.
That was good, man. Okay, everybody, that was the show. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found something worth pulling away from all that information. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again, Tony. We can probably do multiple episodes on any of these topics.
Absolutely. There's a lot to say about these topics. Quality, especially for next week, is going to be a really good one. I actually learned a lot from that, and I've always been interested in that topic. Chris had so many good points and so many good things to say about that, and you had really good questions as well. So I think it'll be very educational.
Yeah, and as Tony alluded to, we are talking with Chris Brown about quality. So we hope you tune into that episode. It was a good one, and Chris was very passionate about it, as all of our bargaining teams are. Thanks again for listening, and we'll talk to you guys next week. We're out.